So this season of Lent, we're going to be having conversations again. And why would we do conversations? And so I wore the explanation tonight. You often hear me talk about this and then this. Our relationship with God. We are called into relationship. We are healed. We are restored, renewed. And then we're sent out to be in right relationship with each other. This and then this. Part of being in relationship with each other is worshiping. Part of it is fellowship over cookies or fellowship over soup, the Eucharist. But part of being in relationship with each other is also sharing our story. And I know as Lutherans we can, have this really tight thing that it's private and it's my story. The reality is, if we believe that life is a gift from God, it's really God's story written on each and every one of us. So this year, during Lent, we're going to get to hear 5 stories. 5 stories about how God is moving within the lives of people in our congregation. And I'm going to go ahead and invite Mark and Jessica to come on up. As they get into place, I'll introduce them. So we got to have a conversation with Mark and Jessica. I don't know how many people remember that. I looked it up today. 2016. Is that what you guys have too? So in 2016, they came in and they were willing to tell us about a journey that they were jumping into. It was early enough in that journey, they had no idea what it was going to look like. They had some plans and some visions, but tonight we get to catch up on what has happened these intervening years. So thank you for being willing to chat with us and share your story. So in 2016, I invited you to share the story, and what was about to happen in 2016?
Okay. Good evening, everybody. He's Mark, I'm Jessica, just so you know. What we were doing in 2016 is that we were toying with an idea of changing up how we operated our household. So Mark was working full-time, plus I was working full-time plus, and the kids were in daycare and went to school in Salem. And something that's different about us is that Mark was born with a heart that I just like to think it was a little off. It was attached a little off. He had something, I know it's really technical, tetralogy of Fallot. It's crooked. It was connected in a very crooked way. I do mean it. Not his, spiritual heart. Well, maybe not too, but, yeah, no, his physical heart was born just a little off. And at a 1.5 years old, he needed to have a pretty significant surgery to repair much of his heart. So he had that in 1974. And the doctors...
Now we're doing the math. That's right.
Just had a birthday. And because of the scarring that existed, his heart had then some interesting electrical circuitry, and that's created more and more and more issues as he's grown older. And so we were at a spot 4 years ago where we had 1 too many visits to the ER, 1 too many surgeries to correct those unusual pathways in his heart. And the doctor had said, we can't do any more ablations. And so we needed to really look at our lives and what was the root cause of the heart issues and the ongoing heart issues, or one significant root cause. And we said, you know what, the work life and the life that we have is too big, and we need to pare down. So in January of 2016, he worked his last day as an engineer up in February, up in Sherwood, and he's been primary parent since then.
Thank you. So when you stepped into the new chapter, as primary parent, I mistakenly wrote down stay-at-home dad.
No.
So, because I don't know
No,
that you
no.
really stay at home. So, primary parent. Mark, as you looked into that, what did you believe that the biggest challenges were going to be?
I figured the biggest challenges for me would be simply stepping away and becoming the person who was now at home with the kids, although at that time 2 of the 3 were full-time school. And in my mind, having worked the way that I did, and everything was pretty regimented, and I'm one who likes my
Your
my
duckies in a row?
routine, so having that
You're an engineer.
freedom, all of a sudden, freedom from the routine was a little overwhelming. But ultimately, the hardest part for me personally was simply the lack of adult contact and connections on a day-to-day basis. So it wasn't taking care of the kids, it wasn't being at home, it wasn't being a volunteer at school, it was simply just not having those adult connections. And that even continues now to a certain extent, not as bad, not as much. Just the lack of adult contact is still one of those things that's just, haven't gotten used to that yet.
Yeah.
So it still kind of is out there.
Mark, do you remember, you told a story that night. You and Charlie had been in the house, and there was a truck, a dump truck or something happening across the street. Do you remember that
Yeah,
story? And do you remember the heart of that?
It was a big cement truck, and they were doing some concrete work, and Charlie was little then, so it was really cool for him to watch, and we walked over there, and the guy running the truck, it was really noisy, and he asked, well, what do you do? And I said, primary parent, and I don't think he really heard what I said. He's like, oh yeah, that's cool. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure he didn't hear what I said, and I don't think it really stuck.
Yeah.
But it was really the first time that I had used those words, and it was like, okay, I can do this, or it was a little easier.
Yeah.
So, but I don't like to use the word stay-at-home dad because it's really not true. I spend 3 days a week, all day at the elementary school volunteering. 2 days a week for most of the year. I do a Lego robotics club after school with various grades, and then in the springtime we do rocket club for the older kids. So it's really not a lot of staying at home.
Right.
So
Right. So Jessica, as you were thinking about this, what did you think the greatest challenges would be from your point of view?
I didn't know how Mark would do with all of the after-school things, chores and homework, and just managing if a kid came home feeling upset. What would that look like? What would that support look like? Like, get over it and get your homework done. Or, I just didn't know how that would be for him. And I didn't know, I think one of the things that we talked a lot about with each other and with you was my value as a wife is in all of the things that I can do at home. All the laundry, all the cleaning, all the cooking, all the things inside the house. That's my programming tells me that's where my value is. And his programming told him where his value was in being the breadwinner. And we had to really talk about what that was going to feel like to kind of flip that on its head, and that it would probably be really hard. So that was a challenge that I thought heading into that we would face.
So you've been at it for 4 years now, living it out. Have there been other challenges? Mark, you said still the adult contact is still a huge challenge. Have there been other challenges that you didn't expect that have come along and surprised you?
I think the challenges that I thought would be challenges aren't challenges at all. We just do what we do. What are challenges?
there haven't really been any big hurdles or challenges, or the two of us generally get along pretty well. So it makes the day-to-day and the year-to-year kind of routine easier, I guess, when we get along. So we're hasn't been too many big challenges. I think the biggest challenges are we're watching the 3 little ones grow up pretty fast, and it's like, next school year, we'll have one in every school, and that's hard.
Yeah.
So.
I have one more to add, though, that the whole goal of this was paring back, and as you heard from over here, he's like overextended sometimes, and so trying to find where the balance is, because once you are known as a person who doesn't work full-time, you're then known as a person, they've got time on their hands. And so everybody seems to think that Mark's got time, and it's hard to say no to things that he gets asked to do. And so we have to really kind of discern for ourselves whether our family can manage one more task, one more volunteer thing, one more, and there's some things that we need to say no to protect our family.
Well, that's really a pretty good bridge into the next question, because the next question is, health was a primary factor in the decision for Mark to hang up his engineering hat. So Mark, how has your health been affected or changed for these 4 years?
Well, it was good for about 2 years, but in the last 13 months, we've had 2 return trips to the ER.
So in the 4 years, 2 trips. What does that numerically look like compared to before the decision? So what does that numerically look like 4.5 years ago, 5 years ago?
I don't know, probably averaged out to
Pretty
an
average, yeah.
annual trip to the ER. So
Okay.
there were like, they would come in packs.
Come in bubbles.
Yeah. So it was probably an annual trip-ish. And you just
Okay.
never knew when it was. It's not like you can schedule that, like, it's about time for your heart. But, so it was pretty sporadic, not regular at all, and it averaged out to about 1 a year.
Okay, until the last 13 months, and then you got 2 in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what has surprised each of you in this new season?
Rock, paper, scissors.
I think the surprises for me are just simply in the old life was the rush to do things as a family unit, because I worked in Sherwood and she was in Salem, and we lived in Mount Angel, and every time that we wanted to be together to go to a school event or it was an ordeal of scheduling, driving on the freeway, and now it just seems more, well, at least for me anyway, it's just more of the natural flow of things, that we live blocks from all 3 schools.
Which is a huge
Which is
gift.
huge, yes. Kids now have friends. Kids now have friends who they never knew because they didn't go to school in town, and they live houses away. So that's been a great surprise, is really having that connection in town, and just to better regulate the schedules, and kind of going into it, we just didn't know what to expect, but that's been a big bonus, I think. That was part of the goal, but it was like, wow, it really did make a huge difference, kind of slowing down and bringing everything, kind of all together. So.
Yeah, I would agree to the community thing. We lived there since 2003, and we made this change in 2016, and the kids started going to school, and all of a sudden there's a little knock on our door. I'm Sailor. I live down the street. Where? Where'd you come from? And another knock on the door. I'm Sam. I live over on Cherry. Can Nora come out to play? So it was like, these kids came out of nowhere. I had no idea we lived around so many kids. And they became this roving pack of kids, and they would go to the park, and that's something we never would have had.
So you guys really got introduced to Mount Angel in a very different way once the kids were in school there. Yeah. So I asked them, because the next part of the question is, how do you think your kids would answer? And I asked them if they wanted to answer, and they said, no, we gave Mom and Dad the answers. Yeah. So how was your kids, knocking at the door, is that a kid answer, or is that your answer? Do the kids have something else they would throw out there as surprises in this new season?
I talked to Nora last night about, and it's hard to talk about my kids without crying, so you get it all. I talked to Nora last night. I talked to Audrey today. Charlie, sorry. You were 3. You didn't know anything. But what they both said is that they were really nervous. They were leaving their schools mid-year. Nora was a 4th grader when this change was happening. And to be leaving a school in the middle of the year feels really scary. And I work in a high-needs school, and kids are moving around all the time, so I didn't think anything of it until it was my own. It's like, wait a second. But we were making the change, and that's just how it was going to be. Both girls said I was really nervous. I was really nervous. I was nervous I wasn't going to have friends. I was nervous about leaving behind friendships that were dear. I was going to miss my teachers, and they just mostly felt really nervous about the change. But they understood it, and they said yes to it anyway. Thanks, guys.
And there was quite a bit of resistance, leading up to the actual changing of schools, because 1 week they were being driven by Jessica back and forth, and then the next Monday it was, we're walking 2.5 blocks. Yeah. So there was a lot of resistance, and it did take some time before they really adjusted and made some friends and discovered that some of these friends live literally houses away at the end of the block. And we had, living there for all those years, we had never really realized, what they were missing with regard to that. But for them, it was pretty tough. And even to this day, they'll say, "Oh, it was hard. We didn't want to do it. It was sad. It was difficult, but now."
Totally worth it,
Yeah,
is what they
it was.
say. They love the smallness of the community, and they love that they have friends, and they love their teachers, and they love that there are grown-ups all around them who seem to know everything about them and are talking to us.
Oh, that's going to be beneficial. So, final question. You ready for it, right? Where and how have you experienced the face of God in this journey that you guys stepped into, plunged into in 2016?
I have 2. Sorry, I'm jumping on this one. The first is that, I don't know if Mark called me at work on the day that he watched all 3 kids walk home, and that was like 2 years into it, because Charlie was little when we were making this change, but watching all 3 kids come back from school in the afternoon. I don't remember if he called me or just told me about it later that day, but just to watch all 3 of them coming home after school, and it's like coming home from work. It's just such a change. It was just this image, and so to me, that's really stuck with me as a face of God moment. And then the other place is just ongoing, where because I don't have this 600-pound gorilla on my back of daycare and trying to get the kids to fed and to meet a school on time, and then leaving school to be picking up a daycare on time. It's just the crush of scheduling that a person usually has to do in that situation. Because that came off, I'm able to share the gifts that I have in my workplace better and be what kids need at my school. So that's been a gift.
And to finish what she's saying is, she gets to be a better principal, but then when she's home now, she can turn it off and be the mother to the 3. Where before it was dinner, baths, bed, and then, now it's she gets to spend that time with them while I do dinner. But for me, it's not so much seeing the face of God, but it's the presence. It's that continuous presence. And it really comes out almost the same way that she said, but it's when they come home and they're landing, their backpacks hit the floor, it's nice to have that time with them, where in the old days, it was dark. I get home, she's got dinner ready, the kids are probably in the bathtub. So it's nice to have that time with them now, where we didn't have it before. So it's more of a presence. It's a daily presence of that gift of time with them.
So it's probably pretty easy to answer the right decision 4 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still
For
miss it.
sure.
You still miss it? But they can both be true?
Absolutely.
Miss it in the right decision?
Absolutely. Go back.
Mark and Jessica, thank you 4 years ago for sharing with us that you were taking the plunge. Thank you for continuing to live it out and share that with us too. Thanks.